Hey, this is Beaux from Beaux Knows Insurance, Read Insurance, talking today about a thing called inflation. Inflation has been talked about all over the news media, online, Facebook, everywhere. We're talking about inflation right now and about how the inflation has just been out of control for the last couple of years. We've gone through a lot of different things that has just really built us up to this point over the last several years that is causing this problem. Well, that may be a word that you don't really understand a lot other than just saying, well, everything's getting more expensive. Well, that's true, but we're throwing around these words, inflation and recession, that we're just throwing around all the time now, and just, I'm going to try to help break it down a little bit for you, just maybe help you to understand what it is, why we're having it, and also how's it going to affect you and what can you do. So let's start talking about that. So first off, let's talk about inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is just things getting more expensive. Now, it's not just because people are just charging more for whatever they do, or companies are, all the big companies are just deciding they want more profit, so they charge more. It's not that at all. The simple fact is that whenever different things happen in the economy, it's going to cause the cost of things to go up. Supply chains, if you think about the last several years, all the different things that have happened. We're going to get into the cause of inflation a little bit more here in a minute, but you think about all the different things that have happened that have just led up to this. Inflation has just been a trickle down effect of a lot of different events that have happened, starting with COVID, honestly. Really, the pandemic that really is what kind of helped spur it. I guess that's really not completely fair, because also some other things that helped also, especially down in the South, but there's a lot of different things that have just trickled down that have made this stair step to where we're at now, so that inflation is coming. So what exactly is inflation? Inflation is the cost of just living things, just things just being more expensive. It's just the common everyday things that we buy: oil, gas, fuel, food, utilities, all these different things, clothing, all these different things just getting to be more expensive because of the underlying costs being more. So what are some common effects of inflation? So some common effects are, it becomes more expensive just to live. It becomes more expensive to drive your car. It becomes more expensive to buy clothes. It becomes more expensive to buy food. All these different things are just different things that will attribute to making your dollar go, not as far. It brings down the value of the dollar that you make. You make whatever amount of dollars that you make, you still make the same amount of dollars, but they just don't go as far. Your purchasing power is reduced, is what happens. It makes, everything like auto insurance and home insurance and just buying cars, buying a house, having repairs done, all those things become more expensive, so that your dollar just does not go as far. So what are some of the causes? Now, let me take you back to a few years, and you may not be aware of this, but if you live in the South, like Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, Florida, Alabama, you're really aware of these different things. 5 years ago, we started having a lot of hurricane activity and storms that came through these areas that were just really massive storms. A lot of other areas, all the way up through the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, we also have had a lot of flooding that has happened because of just excessive amounts of rain that have happened over the last 5 years. We take that, and that has just caused such a big influx of reconstruction costs that have happened, that there's become supply chain issues with those building materials, because all those different events that happened over that 5-year period has just really stretched the current supply chains that we had. We only have so many trees. We can only produce so much lumber at one time. We can only produce so much concrete at one time. And whenever those supply chains become constrained, well, they'll start trying to figure out, well, how do we produce more lumber? How do we produce more concrete? How do we produce more drywall? Where do we find more laborers? And the competition becomes really stiff, or also they have to build new facilities to do that. Well, it drives up the cost to do that. They have to find more ways to transport those materials. Well, that drives up the cost of those things, that leads to inflation. Some other things that happened. Remember, I mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic happened. Well, just a lot of businesses, a lot of the economy, the world economy almost shut down. And the government started pumping money into our government, into our people's hands and our businesses to keep them afloat. These things, well, that money just, that money isn't just free. That money goes back from the taxpayers. The taxpayers have to pay that back. That's just money that's being recirculated. Well, that's more money that's being pumped in there that is increased debt that then has to be paid back. Well, that increases inflation. Well, what else happened during that time? Remember the thing about the hurricane damage and the storm and the flood and all the other stuff doing what it did to the supply chains? Well, whenever people aren't working, well, they're not making stuff. So that creates a supply chain issue where there's now just massive demand for these products, but there's no supply out there. It's kind of like almost the reverse of, there's not a greater demand. There's the same demand, but less output now. So it's the same effect as like with the storm damage thing. That again will create the same problem. Will create problems where you have a lot of demand, no output, supply chain issues that then make everything more expensive because they just can't figure out how to get the stuff out there. So they just start pumping money in to try to make that production happen, and it doesn't. So it winds up pushing inflation. Then we have other things such as, the war in Ukraine. This is also because of the fuel constraints, like Russia is putting the squeeze on oil and natural gas coming out, and also just we have tightened up on some of our regulations inside of the country where our oil production slowed down. Well, we started doing different things to try to manage that. Well, all that also has driven up the cost of products. The government's trying to get a hold on that, but it's a difficult thing. It's not just something you can just say, well, we're going to lower inflation. It just doesn't happen like that. They're doing different things to try to get the inflation rate down, but it's going to take some time, and unfortunately, it's going to be a little painful for us for a little while. We're going to continue to pay excessive amounts of money for products that we used to pay a lot less for a while, unfortunately. Eventually, that will settle down. Our incomes will probably raise up, but those things are going to happen. Some other effects that I didn't mention is, it doesn't affect everybody the same. Like, the more income that you make, the less of an impact it's going to have on you. And it's just a law of numbers. The less money that you make, the more it's going to affect you, and it drives a bigger wedge between the upper and the lower class. It does. It's not because anybody's a bad person. It's not because someone is deceitful or anything like that. It's just the law of numbers. They have more, so it doesn't affect them as much. It still affects them, but percentage-wise, it doesn't affect them as much as it does lower income families. This is a tragedy. There's not an easy solution for that. But I'm going to try to give you a couple of tips. Maybe this can help you out. So what can you do to protect yourself? The sad thing is there's nothing you can do about inflation specifically. There are some things you can do to help hedge yourself. One of them is just make informed and smart decisions. Be careful about the things that you buy. Don't buy just whimsical things. Think, do I really need this? I know that there's looming potential for a recession. There's also, I know inflation is higher. There's only so much money I have in. I need to be smart about the money that I'm spending. Spending on things that are more important, that are more long-term solutions for you and for your family, like education, better housing, different things like that. It just makes more sense. Eating smarter also just makes more sense, because if you eat smarter and you take better care of yourself, you're gonna have less, medical issues and less problematic issues with that. What are some other things? Well, if you're in a position where you can invest your money, well, then maybe you invest in real estate. That's a better long-term safe solution. What about also if you invest in the stock market? Well, that's still a good thing, but maybe you diversify into different market segments. Maybe you look at different things that are going to be a better long-term plan rather than something that's short-term. Don't invest in maybe something that's a very new company. Maybe invest in something that's a company that's been around for a really long time, that's a really large company that has been incredibly stable, and that's going to continue to do well. Hey, this is just some different tips that may help you out. I know that inflation and recession, these terms can be really scary, but hey, if you just make informed decisions, we're going to ride this out. The United States economy is the biggest economy in the world, and also it's still the best economy in the world also. We're going to make it through this, and we're going to get through there on the other side. Just be patient and be smart about how you spend your money, and don't let fear overtake you and make you make poor decisions. Hey, this is Beaux from Beaux Knows Insurance, Read Insurance. I know we're talking a little bit different segment there, but hey, if this video helps you out, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that thumbs up button if it helps you out. If you got any questions or any other topics you'd like me to talk about, hey, leave them in the comments section. I'd be glad to cover those for you. I appreciate you checking us out and hope you have a great day. Bye.